Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We have guests joining us from Ireland, from all around Australia, and I think we might even sneak a couple of Kiwis in late to the piece as well. We are very fortunate today to have speakers from the Australian side of our conversation in Stephen Moore and Col Blackley from NAPCO, who will present the Australian perspective on all things agribusiness. Joining us from a remarkably sunny Dublin at breakfast time is Gary Wickham from MagGrow. So really what we want to do today is just have a little look at what's going on within the sector, see what attracted these guys into the market, get a bit of feedback from the local experts as to where they might fit in, and have a little look at what might be next. So in terms of housekeeping, you guys can ask questions through either the chat or the Q&A function. Feel free to put them through. I'll moderate any questions that come in. As soon as I say that, it could be like yesterday where I asked people to put it in the chat function and I got text messages with it. So who knows what we'll do, but we'll kick off. Gary, what was the problem that MagGrow set out to fix?
Well, from the very beginning, we knew we had a big problem to solve. Pesticide spray, about 70% of what's sprayed in the world doesn't stay or remain on the target crop. So to put that in financial numbers, that's about $60 billion of crop protection products don't stay or remain on the target crop using conventional technology. And there's two main technologies. I'd say conventional is nozzle technology, where farmers use different nozzles to try and control airborne drift, exodrift, to the detriment of endodrift, which is runoff drift, effectively where it either hits the crop or it misses it in the target zone and runs into our rivers and streams. The net result of that, you're using water to make up the mix, and you're also then contaminating water on the outside. So you're unnecessarily using a lot of waste, and that's the problem that MagGrow solves. So we knew we had this massive problem, massive market opportunity. We went about it a different way, though. We didn't just develop a product and, went out into a farm and see could we get it to work. We spent about 10 million euro. What's that, about maybe 15 or 16 million US dollars to develop this technology, and spent about 4 to 5 years doing that. We set up in University College Dublin in a place called Nova UCD, an incubation centre. David and I, my co-founder, just the two of us, typical startup, and we built the organisation out, built prototypes, and we quickly identified that we really needed to get the customer community behind us. We needed to get the field research centres, specialists in spray area behind us. And also on the empirical and lab side, we needed to get some of the universities around our technology behind us. I'll explain what our technology does. It uses magnetic systems, magnetic technology, by passing the pesticide fluid, whether it be insecticide, fungicide, or indeed post-emergent herbicide. If you pass it through these magnetic fields under appropriate flow conditions, you change the properties of the fluid. And I won't go into what exactly it's doing at a molecular level or a physical or a chemistry level, but effectively you change those properties and you make it easier for the droplets to stick to the crop by changing some of the parameters. So you change the spray characteristics and you end up with a unique droplet profile that isn't too small to drift into the air or too large to run off. So you get this sweet spot of droplet size. And critically, we allow growers to use a different range of nozzles, smaller nozzles, which they wouldn't ordinarily do because of drift. Now we overcome the compromise between conventional technology, where they're trying to control drift at the expense of coverage. And that's this 70% waste problem. So effectively, that's the problem we solve. And we now work with various universities like Wickham University in the Netherlands on the field research centre side, Trinity College Dublin on the magnetic technology side. In fact, we brought those two universities together and we've just submitted a European Union funded application, 4 million grant funded application with a research centre in Spain around irrigation technology, working together, a dream team of universities on their technology. And we've supported that or supplemented that by having a number of our own facilities. In the UK, we have a crop science centre. We have an industrial engineering research centre. that looks at benchmarking. It's looking at nanotechnology. We're actually working on a COVID project, would you believe, with Air Technology to do with spraying of crops in a safe way. And also for sanitizing facilities, rooms, hospitals in a safe way, and so on. So our technology, we can touch on at the end, does wonderful things outside agriculture as well, but we're really focused around agriculture right now, especially in our tractor boom application, although we do have other products. So that was it really. So we spent 4 or 5 years, and then we scaled through channel partners, and we signed a worldwide non-exclusive deal with Trimble Ag to distribute their product worldwide and access to their dealers. And we also deal with other dealers and large growers direct.
Okay, so that's the problem that you set out to fix. Col, we were talking beforehand. Steve kind of threw you under the bus by telling us that you were the go-to man that knew everything around farming in Australia. What are the challenges and the opportunities that you see in terms of agribusiness in Australia at the minute? And where do these guys fit in?
Well, I think one of the big issues we have is we're conservation farmers. We need to maintain crop stubble to maintain moisture. So we actually really do have to concentrate on chemistry, which we're having a lot of issues with, resistance. We're also we're trying to improve the way that we use our chemicals. Drift is a big issue and continues to be, but we're going the other way. We're using bigger droplets, less water than probably they use over there. Also, a big thing that we have got in place is camera spraying, and I think one of the big issues in the future is to spray weeds, whether it's in crop or not, and actually target the weed itself. So they're probably the big challenges we have in regard to our conservation farming at this.
How have you seen the sector change in the time that you've been in it?
Well, we used to conventionally farm, lots of ploughing. We had probably more rainfall. Our average rainfall's gone from over 700 mils to 650 mils a year. That's probably only in the last 10 years. So we've had to adapt to our climate to essentially become farmers of moisture. And that's how we grow our crops around around moisture and not so much a rotation now. And that's where spraying technology is very important to us at the moment.
Okay. Steve, you and I have spoken about Irish Australian opportunities in AgriTech before. I know we tried to smuggle you over on one of our delegations to Ireland to meet a few of these AgriTech businesses. Dairies didn't work out, so we had to bring one to you, which we've done today. But how did you end up at NAPCO, and what's your role within the organisation?
Yeah, thanks, Barry, and thanks for having us on. I appreciate it. I guess when I was wrapping up my previous life about 2.5 years ago, I thought after 20 years I had to get a real job eventually. So opportunity came through one of the shareholders of NAPCO, Queensland Investment Corporation, and I took a role in the head office here in Brisbane. So been here about 2.5 years now and really enjoying it. I look after a number of different areas in the business, HR, workplace health and safety, IT, corporate affairs, and I guess sustainability, which is a growing area within corporate agriculture. It's something that's always been around agriculture, and particularly NAPCO has always had a focus on it. But I think the way we need to communicate it, the interest from customers, shareholders, investors is growing all the time, and therefore our requirement to continue to report and to be more transparent about how we manage sustainable agriculture is always increasing. So we're involved in a fair bit of that. And as Col just spoke about, we're always looking for ways to become more efficient, more effective at what we do. And things like technology are providing good opportunities to do that. We're a country in Australia where we have, a scarcity of resources, water being one of them. And suitable land being another one. So we're always looking at ways we can improve that and conserve that so that we can be around for a long time. Our company's been around 140 years, so we've always looked after what we've had, and we want to continue to do that into the future. And I guess that's why we're always interested in the developments around farming and farming technology. Farming is an area that has a lot of precision and technology, and I think that'll continue to be a big benefit for us.
Okay, and particularly for those joining us from Ireland or watching back the recording over there, the scale of the NAPCO operation is astonishing. Could you give us a bit of perspective in terms of the scale of which you operate? Yeah,
so we've got 14 properties across about 6 million hectares, all around Northern Australia, mostly in Queensland and the Northern Territory. And we run about 180,000 head of cattle. So, we run our cattle from a breeding operation in the north through a growing and backgrounding phase, and then into a feedlot in the Darling Downs, which is where our farm is also located. And our farm out there is a bit over 4,000 hectares. Is that right, Col?
4.5.
4,500 hectares. So that surrounds our feedlot, and then we sell to some customers, some major customers here in Australia and also overseas. So certainly the scale is something that's very unique to our part of the world. And I've got 3 uncles that are dairy farmers in Ireland, and you could fit all their operations inside our feedlot, I think, in one hit. And it's a very different type of farming, but all the same, we're all looking for improvements and ways to do better and be more efficient and be more profitable over time. So whilst the operations might look different, I think the intent and the outcomes are all much the same. Okay,
Gary, what was the thought process around coming to Australia and bringing MagGrow into this market?
Yeah, so we actually have had a number of inquiries from Australia for a couple of years, and New Zealand as well, mainly Australia. But we knew from our market entry elsewhere that you need to have the right team on the ground. We basically had been researching the market. We knew it was a huge opportunity. Large farms, as Steve just mentioned, very high innovators. Australia has been innovating for 30, 40, 50 years in terms of technology and high productivity levels. I think we're coming to the stage where the next wave is needed for Australia to maintain that productivity or enhance on it, to feed a growing population, do it sustainably, critically make a living for farmers. I mean, this is a common problem worldwide, and also protect the environment. So farmers want to do that. People don't understand that if you're not in the farming community. I've had to learn that farmers know what their requirements are around sustainability, but they need the tools, they need support. If I look at numbers in terms of government investment in Australia, and by the way, it's better than Ireland, so Australia is certainly not the worst. But in terms of farming income, about 1.2% of farming revenue is invested by the Australian government to support farmers. The equivalent in the US is 10%. In China, it's about 22%, and Japan about 43%. Just to give you the context of numbers. So I think farmers need support. There's a lot of things changing. So when we analyse the market, you've got the average age of a worker in Australia is about 38. In farming, it's about 56. So classically, all over the world, you've got an aging population in the farming community. The next generation don't necessarily want to take on farms. They want to move into city life. You have a unique change in Australia where if you look at the universities, over half the people attending agricultural college in Australia are female. So you could see a shift where farms are not being left to sons, but being left to daughters. So there's a lot of demographic changes. The forecast for Australia is to go from, I think it's about 25 million to 30 million over the next 10 years. That's a significant jump, and possibly 50 million by 2060. So to feed that growing population using the current techniques, I don't think will stand. It's the same world over. So you need innovation, you need sustainability, make farmers profitable and sustainable. That's what MagGrow does, and that's how it steps in, and we do our bit to solve that equation. So we knew there was a massive opportunity. One of our shareholders, who's an Australian national, he invested last year, and then I went over to the Evoke conference. I met you in Melbourne. And we knew some people there. We made some great connections, had great support from Enterprise Ireland, who support us here back in Ireland and over in Australia. And on the back of that, then we went around and, we met DLL in terms of setting up, part of Rabobank, access for farmers for funding to acquire MagGrow technology, which, thankfully we've agreed with. We also met with Trimble, who we have a relationship with, and their dealers. And then we started working with Enterprise Ireland and the other connections to build out our dealer base. And then we recruited some people down there, one through yourself, through a connection you knew. And very quickly we got up and running, faster than I thought, to be honest with you, to the point where we've built up a really strong pipeline, and we've got our first installs happening. And our model is very simple. We do installs, we find early adopters, and then we involve the agronomy teams for those farms and try to involve research centres as well, because we want to build those relationships with the experts. And then we have them all independently validate side-by-side testing with MagGrow. So typically you would have two sprayers, same nozzles, boom height, forward pressure, forward speed, pressure and rates. And then the other kit would be the same, but just have MagGrow on it, and you keep them the same. Though even though we prefer to use smaller nozzles, we'd keep them the same to isolate the magnetic effect within the MagGrow technology. And we have the agronomy teams on both sides, crop science sign off, a detailed protocol, and then usually an independent third party. And effectively then you issue those results. We look at seasonality, so using the technology over season as well. There's no maintenance, cables, wires, moving parts. So that's critical for farmers as well in terms of downtime and productivity. And also with our technology, not only do you use less water and chemicals, you create less waste, but there's actually less spray events. We have growers using our technology for 3 or 4 years now. And because the efficacy and coverage is so good at getting on target, there's less disease pressure, and you have less spray events. So in those cases, you're saving 100%, as well as the saving during the spray events themselves. And in fact, I think Col mentioned about crop protection products. People don't like pesticides, but they're a necessary product that we need in this world. Without them, we would probably starve to death. We had the green revolution in the 70s, where increased mechanization, access to crop protection products or pesticides became available on a widespread level, and that allowed us to feed the world. We've 2 billion more people coming on this planet, and to put that in context, we need to grow the same amount of food over the next 40 to 50 years as in the last 10,000 years combined. And yet we're using over 80% of the total available water in Asia, Africa, and places like California. And obviously we know in Australia, water is a particular challenge. So we will never meet that challenge or target without sustainable innovation. And again, that's where technologies like MagGrow come in. So it's got to be through innovation that we succeed. And I think, in Australia for the last 30 or 40 years, the farmers have done a wonderful job of producing food. In fact, Australia is one of the most food secure countries in the world. There is challenges around drought, but it goes to show you how good a job Australian farmers have done. 70% of food is exported, mainly grains and meat, red meat. And then on a domestic level, things like poultry, pork and horticulture are consumed in the domestic market. With that population growth, you will not probably be able to maintain those targets or levels without innovation. And so we saw the opportunity, same language, same culture, more or less same legal system. And again, when you've got a culture and people that are really highly innovative and willing to look at new technology, Steve mentioned and touched on that as well, it was a no-brainer. And then we had the support on the ground and the time was right.
Okay. Col, just throwing to you, you've been around the industry for a number of years. For companies like Gary's and other Irish businesses, who are involved in the sector and bringing a product innovation, whatever. What advice would you give to them? I mean, what do you see coming down the line in terms of the problems that will need to be solved in the next 10 years?
I think most of the people coming out with the technology are jumping the gun a bit before they hit the market. Some of those, they're still in what would you say, the testing phase, if you like, in field. I think some of them need to be hitting the ground running a bit better when they bring the technology in. We use a lot of technology here with like spraying and so on, but we're still moving forward there. We're not 100%. I think if something comes out, it needs to be well and truly, usable.
Yeah. So Australia shouldn't be the test market. Anyone who's considering coming into the market needs to have done what Gary and his team have done to really prove the concept over several years and have that evidence.
So we've got continuing R&D on a lot of the stuff that we're doing, and eventually we're getting there, but some of those new technologies are probably 2 years off being perfect.
Okay. Steve, I probably jinxed myself saying that people will probably use all sorts of ways to send me questions, and there I've got one on a text message. In terms of sustainability within the sector, how much would you see it being driven by the consumer as opposed to the producers, the farm operators?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and I think we're currently sort of on that journey a little bit, because there's no doubt that something like price, for example, is still a big driver of consumer behaviour, but there is always that section of the market that wants to know a bit more about where their food was produced, and therefore is willing to pay a little bit more for that story, and a good story. People that are able to tell the story of provenance, and in our case, it might be animal welfare or environmental management, as we've been speaking about how you manage your land sustainably. It's something that is talked about an awful lot in Australia. So it's something that we continue to work on and to try and make progress on. But the consumer ultimately will determine where this all goes. And I think if there's an appetite out there for more sustainably produced products over time, which it feels like there will be, then the producers will move in that direction. And producers are well tuned into what the market is doing, and I think that's important. And that's always been the case. I think that's always, consumers always dictated where the market is.
Okay, Gary, from what you're hearing about the Australian experience from Col and from Steve, how does that contrast with the work that you guys are doing in the likes of California and whatever?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, each country has its own challenges. As I mentioned, there's many parts of the world have water challenges. I think farmers in general all over the world have problems with existing actives or products. There's less and less available due to regulation. More and more are being banned. And I'll give you an example. There's a product called dicamba in the States, which is a product that farmers heavily rely on to kill weeds. And weeds compete with crops for nutrients and moisture and so on. So they affect yield if you have high weed levels. So there's less and less tools for farmers to use. So they have an impossible challenge. They're trying to grow excess food. They're trying to be profitable. You have to be profitable before anything else, right, in the first instance. And yet they want to be sustainable as well. And when you've got less and less products, just on the product side, it takes an average 13 years, a 1 in 10 chance to succeed, and about $250 million for those big ag chemical companies to develop those products. Extraordinary numbers. So what's happening is, a bit like antibiotics, there's less being developed. Crops are becoming resistant to them. I think Carl touched on that as well. So farmers have less tools to use. So they're having a difficult time in terms of regulation, and yet they've got these challenges: rising labor costs, input costs, and then commodity prices are fluctuating. So you have market volatility, you have climate volatility. So they have many, many challenges to deal with. So I think those problems are common. In California, I think they have issues around the machinery they use. It's pretty old, it's out of date. They have very good practices, but I think they need to enhance the technology that they're using. So there are some old practices in existence even in America. On the other hand, on the big row crop farms, a bit like Australia, they're using really advanced technology. But to me, most farmers are using the same technology for 20 or 30 years. And there needs to be a big shift to using new innovative technology. Part of the problem, if I go back to Col's point, is that 9 out of 10 startups in this space fail. They're not around to support farmers. They appear, they disappear. We've been on farms for 3 or 4 years, and in fact, the design of our product was designed by farmers. We had 7 or 8 different iterations till we got it right. And so that field research center testing and customer testing was critical in terms of getting the product right, to the point where there's no maintenance moving parts and they don't have to worry about it, and there's no electricity involved. So it's really simple. Technology is very complex below the surface, but simple to use. And we knew that was a game changer to have zero downtime. And so, you have to deal with seasonality in farming. It takes a lot of money. So that's why a lot of ag tech innovations never make it. And that's why I think governments need to provide support for some of these companies. They're small, they're trying to build out teams. And then, they may not get revenue for 3, 4, or 5 years because of the seasonality effect. It could take 3 or 4 seasons to test your product if you want to do it correctly. It takes a lot of money. And in our case, it took us €10 million to get to that point. So very few startups, we're a scale up now, but very few startups can afford to do that. And I'm lucky with my investors that we were able to, they saw the vision and the dream, and we were able to sustain that business model and strategy. So the other thing is we have technology around irrigation coming that so far at kind of lab and field level is going to reduce water required for irrigation versus conventional by 40%. So we're developing new applications on the back of what we're doing now with farmers all over the world. But I do think there's 3 universal problems. We need to feed the world together. We need to make farmers profitable, because no matter what we do, if they can't earn a living, what good is that? And then we need to protect the environment. And the only solution is innovation technologies like MagGrow, but we need to support those innovators. And that's my view.
Okay. One last point, because I know we're sort of getting on to time. Steve, in your previous career, you loved to win things in New Zealand. Nothing like a victory over there. Gary's just picked up a prize at Field Days, the big agricultural event over there in the Innovation Award. So tell us about that, Gary. What's what was behind it? What impressed? What caught the Kiwis out?
Yeah, very, very difficult to catch the Kiwis out, as you know. So that was an achievement in itself. We basically, as part of our strategy and market entry, not just working with research centres and collaborating with customers, we wanted to enter various events around the world over the last few years. PR is good, but networking is more important, and get to meet farmers, growers, other innovators, and influencers. And so we've won the Thrive Accelerate in California. We won the Innovation Award at the Ploughing in Dublin. And we also knew, in terms of market entry into Australia and New Zealand, that Field Days is one of the biggest events in the world. And we see Australia and New Zealand as being our hub for, that part of the world, Asia as well. And we want to build crop science centres down there. We want to put manufacturing in place for there, and export from that part of the world to Asia as well in due course. So we see this as a stepping stone. And when the opportunity came to enter Field Days, we knew it was one of the biggest programs of the type in the world. We knew there'd be a lot of influences. We knew there'd be many people we could network with, investors, customers, and, as I said, influencers. And also it was a way of getting, MagGrow technology on the map in that part of the world. And so we submitted our application, slightly different this year. It was online, still a very interesting experience, very professionally run. And then I was then interviewed by a series of judges for, I don't know, about an hour, grilled about our market entry, our strategy, and our technology. our business model, the science behind our technology. And thankfully, we were announced as winners the other day, which is great for us, very early in our market entry strategy down in New Zealand and indeed Australia. So we were thrilled, and I think it's really added value to what we're trying to do down there.
So in summing up, the consumers want a more sustainable agribusiness model. The farmers want it to happen. The limiting factor is around the innovation and, getting maybe some better government policies coming through as well. So it looks like the opportunities are there. We need to find more MagGrows, support them to develop those technologies, and hopefully bring a few of them over to Australia. And once we're able to get out and about again, we'll hopefully get Steve and Col over to the ploughing championships over in Ireland, and let you see some of the other elements of the industry in Ireland, and how we can build those networks as well. So thank you all for coming on. Enjoyed the chat. Great to get those perspectives, bring it all together. I learned a lot, and thank you all for sharing.